Hello, riders. Okay, I have 15 minutes to put everything into this screencast that we would normally do over the course of a whole class period that we should have done on Monday, going over these research exercises to learn how to use the library. So I'm going to hurry through this very quickly, and we'll touch upon some of this when we get back in the classroom after break. But I wanted to give you enough information to set you forward so that you have an opportunity to get to work on your projects. And how to start doing the research that's required. So I go to our main class page here, and I click on project number 2, informative report, and we see that we have the handout for the project number 2 that we already talked about, and then we have further on down research and documentation resources. Okay, so much of what we're going to need to do in this paper, if you've looked at video number 2, you know what the main thrusts of the assignment are. One of the things we need to do is to find the source material, find good evidence, find good research, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. At some point when we get back from spring break, we'll spend much more time talking about how to format and cite your papers and utilize APA formatting. There's a handbook that I put together for this. There's a sample document that you could take a look at. This is a literature review that is a model of an APA paper, and it's also a good model of a literature review. So it's an example of a paper. It's almost exactly 2,000 words. It has a number of sources. It shows how something like this could be cited. This is what we use in tech writing because in that class we do these literature reviews. You're doing some sort of report that involves information, and so it wouldn't necessarily have to follow this format, but that kind of gives you a good idea. So there's lots of resources here that you can pick up on. There's a couple of handbooks that I've copied the pages off. There's a couple of links to the library documents that the research librarians have put together for you. There's the databases, and we'll talk more about this in just a second, and there's the research guide. So the librarians on our campus have put these together, and you can see that there's various fields that are represented here: applied science, wildlife, and agriculture. If we look at something like that, it brings up a list of book materials, web links, search terms. These can be very helpful in sort of sorting out your topics. And then what I typically do when we come together for the class to do the sort of library exercise is we talk about the various types of information that you might be looking for in your paper. So if I go back to the report itself, the handout itself, one of the things that's suggested as a requirement is that you have 3 academic scholarly sources that you cite in your paper. Now this is a website that's linked in that actual handout that describes what the difference is between a popular and a scholarly source, and where you can find journal articles, really respectable journalism, and other sources that could satisfy the 3 source requirement in your paper. Too oftentimes students rely way too much on just a Google search, or they just grab whatever sort of news articles there are or whatever's on the internet. We don't want to use that. We want to use peer-reviewed as much as possible journal type articles from basically from universities and from research institutions and that sort of thing. So keep that in mind, and let's talk a little bit about the basic overview of research that we typically would do. So if we had a schedule that was more amenable to it, I would have you do a research exercise. It is listed in our course site here. I don't know that I'm going to assign it, but it is listed here under project number 2, research exercise. And if you click on that, it brings up this exercise which asks students to take their topic that they've narrowed down, and you take it into the library. I have students go into the library, and then you look for a book, as you can see here. I have this, and due to the call number and the author and the title and all the bibliographic information, I have them look for a reference from the reference section of the library, and then I have them look for a periodical. Okay, so there's 3 basic elements of scholarly research that we typically do, and I spent a lot of time in class going over the fact that this can be internet or it can be done in the library, but the basic concept is still the same. The internet is a tool which brings these more scholarly sources to you. Books, reference materials, periodicals. Books, reference materials, periodicals. Okay, I think we all know what a book is. A book is, a long document, a monograph that covers a topic fully. In our particular papers, maybe books will not be quite as useful because in our library especially, they tend to be a little bit dated, and you have all this material you have to get through in a book. And but if you find a book that's related to your subject, it could be one of the sources that you use in this paper. You're going to use just a portion of the book, obviously, for your research. Then there's these reference materials. And so when students do this exercise, they go into the library and they go to the reference librarian and they ask what sort of references they are. And these would be things that are like encyclopedias, almanacs, bibliographies, compilations of essays on a specific topic. They're organized by the Dewey Decimal System in our library. And as you can see in this little handout that I use in class, the categories are defined for what the broad sort of outlines are. So if you have a Dewey Decimal is 1.6 would be science, 1.9 would be literature, 1.10 would be geography. So if you go over to the ready reference in our library, you'll see in there that dictionaries and bibliographies and almanacs and other things that sort of compile information. And these sources were very much the Google of their day. So you would go and you would have this compiled information easily accessible, sort of like a Wikipedia article on a wide variety of subjects. Now, they're still excellent resources because this is a term I use when we talk about this in class. They're curated. These are lots of information that librarians have sorted through, and they say these are good sources for our students. So that's probably where students have the most problem these days. It's not finding the information, it's being overwhelmed with too much information. So these ready references can really help you narrow down and get sort of access. So I know they have really good bound editions of the CQ Researcher on current events. They have a lot of medical dictionaries or an ecological dictionary, things that sort of break your topic down into sort of manageable parts. And then the bread and butter of most academic research at the college level are periodicals. And we're looking there are journals. Now, you probably know magazines like a Sports Illustrated or a Time magazine or something like that. But and those may be something that you could use in your paper, but we don't want to rely too much on popular sources. We would like to see you get used to using journal articles. And journals, there's a wide variety of journals. We have both bound copies and single issues of journals in our library, and that's what I have students go and look at. And they're obviously very specific to a discipline or a field, Journal of Ecology or something like that. And also these journal articles are then available online through the main source, which is the EBSCO or any of the other library databases, which we'll go over here. Now, be aware that journal articles can come in a variety of types. They're going to be peer-reviewed for the most part. That means that the material that's published in them has been reviewed by people in the field, so it's very trustworthy. They tend to have a lot of citations, a lot of references to the sources that they're using. So that's really one of the areas we want to make sure that incoming first-year students are aware of as a resource. So I'm going to pause here, and then I'm going to open up EBSCO. Okay, I'm on the main page of our course site, and you'll see we do have a library link, and also in the research and documentation resources I have a link to the library databases. Okay, so the library, if you click on the library link, and if you aren't on campus, it needs to have your credentials because the databases that we use are extremely expensive to subscribe to, and so they don't want just anybody off the street to be able to use them. You have to be able to demonstrate that you're a college student. So if you go through our course site and use the library link there, or use what they call a proxy server, then you can usually get in. Now, there's lots of ways you can search, and we don't have time in this video to go over them all, but what you will want to be using is something like EBSCO or one of the specialized databases. You'll see that they have listed these by disciplines, so subjects, general reference, journals. The main resource that we'll probably wind up using most is EBSCO. You might also use Google Scholar, you might use JSTOR, but EBSCO is the one that we tend to use the most. So in this case, we pull up a window and it's going to ask for my proxy so I can get into the website. Hopefully it works. A lot of times I can't get this to work from home. Okay, so we're going to go to Academic Search Premier, and this is what you should be doing on your topics once you narrow them down over the next couple weeks. So in our forum where everybody was sharing topic ideas with them, we had a suggestion of doing a paper that was sort of an evaluation or an explanation of a plant, cannabis sativa, the sort of non-psychotropic form of marijuana. Another one, broadly conceived, would deal with environmental law, and another one was discussing elements of environmental geoscience. Now, what I would say about these topics so far, and I'm going to put some hints in in that form itself, is we probably want to narrow these down a little bit. So if we take something like environmental law, that's a pretty big topic. So we do environmental, okay, and what is nice about Google or EBSCO and other sources is that they now give us these possible search terms, right? So they narrow down the search for us. So environmental impact. So let's go to the next term. Let's go environmental, and then let's go to law. Okay, or let's try it up here actually. Environmental law. Let's try spelling it right. Law and policy. So you have all these different subsets, and this is what you probably need to do, is to break down your topic into something a little bit more focused and manageable. So environmental law enforcement, environmental law and globalization, environmental law and policy. Is this what we want to sort of look at? So now we can do a search, and we can limit our search to full text, scholarly. We can put a date range in there. We can do, publication types. There's all sorts of things we can do. So we click the search term. We're going to get lots of options. Private policing of environmental performance, does it further public goals? You see PDF full text, ecosystem services and the law, does environmental policy affect scaling laws between? So there's lots of information here, and these would all be useful sources, but they're all over the place. So this is not a very focused subject at this point. So we definitely want to be looking for some trends, and there's ways that you can use the search terms here to try and narrow that down, and that's usually something that we go over in class quite a bit. We try that out. One other thing I'll show you that's just a quick tip, so this is EBSCO. We'll try and spend a little bit more time on this in class, is if you click on one of these links and you're able to bring it up, you do have these tools off to the side here, right? So one of the tools that you have is the Cite tool. So this is an EBSCO. So if you click Cite, it will show you how to cite this source and format it for your actual paper. So here you can see how it would appear at the end of your paper in the references page, and you kind of see the APA formatting. So I just want to make sure that I showed that to you. I'm going to share a video in this section today that comes from a library database that shows how to use the proper search terminology in EBSCO, and it's a very useful video, and it's only a few minutes, so I'm going to definitely suggest that everybody take a look at that. The only other thing I would maybe say about this that we would spend a little bit more time on in class would be when we talk about finding books, or what we call the on-site collection in our own library on campus. And there is a library catalog for that. It is right here. Search the library catalog, and just be aware that if you're ever in a screen like this is Chatham State College, Peru State College, and Wayne State College, that what you're searching here is not that EBSCO database which has all the most recent articles, and these are the physical holdings that are in these 3 college libraries in the state of Nebraska. And so it's going to be limited to the sort of books that you, same sort of thing with the search terms and everything, but it's going to be limited with the sort of search terms that you want to bring up. One thing I would suggest is to maybe put a search term in there, go find a book, and when you're in the library, look in that area where that book is found and see if there are other resources that are kind of similar. All right, so that's basically Library Research 101 in 15 minutes. We'll study this a little bit more in the coming weeks, but I just wanted to give you a heads up and get you going in the right direction.